Now then, I've just noticed something. You're not thinking about this. Well, you better start thinking about it, because you're coming over soon. I expect you there. You better be there. They better be there, because if you're not there, we're going to have words. We're going to have very strong words, very, very robust words. So get this end here. You'll have a good time. Anyways, we'll get on with the video. How are we doing, everybody? Sean Moso, Prince Steel, Tethyosaurus Yorkshire, and I'm back again with another good video. And this time we're going to do a bit of an interesting one. We're going to make our way out of the sea, and we're going to get onto land. Yeah, we're going to get onto dry land and have a bit of fun. Because today I thought I'd do another sup with video, because I ain't done one of them in a while, and I do apologise about that. Well, it's not like I've had any other things going on in my life, you know. Anyways. But no, I thought today we'd do a bit of an interesting topic, a recent topic in paleontology, and that is sup with Dacentrurus and Miragaia. Oh yeah, would you like the title, by the way? STEGO Wars. I thought about that. It took me 5 minutes to come up with that topic, and it's absolutely brilliant. I love it, because imagine stegosaurs, but the Phagomites with lightsabers. I'd pay to see that trilogy. It'd be better than the sequel trilogy, I'll tell you that. Right, so let's go over the Darth Vader of this proverbial pair in the STEGO Wars, you know, really cool name, by the way, like STEGO Wars. But anyways, Dacentrurus armatus from Europe, so large stegosaurian dating to around the late Jurassic, possibly into the early Cretaceous, but I'm very ambiguous about that just because the holotype, which is a kerfuffle of hind limb, pelvic, armour and vertebral material, was found in the Kimmeridge Clay Formation, which dates to the Kimmeridgian, so around about 154 million years ago, to the Berezine in the early Cretaceous, so about 140 million years. So I'm doubting this fellow was about 14 million years in existence. I'm doubting that. But anyways, this limited material, however, gave a sort of good idea what this animal looked like. So we knew there was a stegosaur, and quite a typical stegosaur, kind of. We think it had a long neck. We do know that it actually had short little plates along the neck, possibly larger plates along the back, but we don't really have those. And we've also got some spikes that are on the tail. You did not want to be stood behind this fella. He would absolutely decimate you. And imagine if he was a Darth Vader Stegosaurus. All those spikes would be lightsabers. That's terrifying. But anyways, this guy was first described by Richard Owen in 1875, and again based off of the holotype, which was just a jumble of hind limb, pelvic, caudal and spike material, so not really much to go off. But then obviously later discoveries of other stegosaurs allow us to get a better idea of what this animal looked like, and he probably looked a bit like this. Less angry though. But anyways, apart from that, several specimens and species have come and gone from the genus, leaving Dacentrurus armatus as probably the only species really. But there is material from France that has been attributed to the species, and yeah, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, we have no idea. But yeah, Dacentrurus for you, the Darth Vader. Now let's go on to Luke Skywalker. So, Miragaia, the Luke Skywalker in this situation, so he doesn't have red, you know, Phagomizes, he has green ones. Or if you're a fan of Empire Strikes Back, you can change to blue, but I don't really care. But anyways, Miragaia, you can actually copy and paste a lot of what I've said about Dacentrurus onto this fella in terms of the general morphology, so the long neck, the plates along the neck and the back, we actually have better evidence for this fella, and spiky tail, like I said. Now this guy probably wasn't as big as Dacentrurus, probably about 6.5 meters in length and weighed up to 2 tons, so marginally different weight estimates for this guy. This guy was first described and discovered in the Larraña Formation in Portugal in 2009, and was not just referred from the holotype but also some referred specimens as well, which is really good. In fact, they found several specimens to a point where they actually had to call the unit they found it in the Miragaia unit. That's really cool. It gets its own bed named after it. That's fantastic. But lived about 150 million years ago during the Kimmeridgian. Not just restricted to Europe, but also has been found in North America, but that's jumping ahead a bit. But Miragaia, yeah, you could argue, yeah, copy and paste of Dacentrurus, but with subtle differences here and there. So now we've outlined the players, let's really get into the mess. And trust me, it's as bad as Prognathodon. So, let's jump into it, but for context, I'm going to use this picture of Dacentrurus because, you know, really, really nice image. But anyways, 2008, Mayman actually referred material that was previously known as mainland European Dacentrurus armatus into Dacentrurus sp, and then has been now rendered as Numendubia, so unfortunately defunct. So Dacentrurus is not doing so well out the gate. But this leads into the next year. 2009, with the description of Miragaia, you actually see that when the phylogenetics on Miragaia are performed, the Miragaia and Dacentrurus are sister taxa. How cool is that? We've only just started with the description of Miragaia and we've already got the problems. Additionally, in the same paper that described Miragaia, we also see that there's actually notes about the cervical ribs, so the hanging off bits of the neck vertebrae, as well as the pubic bone, which I'm not going to show you on camera because inappropriate. Those two elements are quite similar in Dacentrurus, so already we're starting to mirror up that Miragaia and Dacentrurus are a bit closer than what we think. Kovacs et al. 2010 actually made pretty interesting notes on Miragaia and Dacentrurus and noted that one, Dacentrurus actually kind of overlaps with Miragaia in some respects, and also that Miragaia actually has material that Dacentrurus is missing, and the fact that they're in the same sort of age layers across Europe means that probably they're bridging specimens, that if you put them together they make one whole specimen. And also noted that during this time in Europe, during the late Jurassic, there was repeated sea rise and sea fall, and therefore that this meant that there was intercontinental travelling and migration of different Jurassic faunas across Europe. So it was proposed that possibly Dacentrurus and Miragaia are the same animal, therefore Dacentrurus had a European-wide empire, if you like, the empire of Dacentrurus, Darth Dacentrurus. Well, 2013 was another Cobos year because Cobos and another colleague actually came back with the description of more material of Dacentrurus from a formation in Spain and noted that this taxon had a lot of intraspecific variability, so basically differences in the skeletons between individuals of the same species, and also noted that, hey, you can see this sort of variability in specimens of Kentrosaurus, which is a small little stegosaur from Africa who has shoulder spikes, so you wouldn't mess about with him, would you? Nah. He was the Mace Windu of the stegosaur world. Now, there was a bit of a lull in this for about 6 years until 2019 when Costa and Mateos countered this argument with a description of new Miragaia material and argued that, in fact, Dacentrurus and Miragaia were two separate animals. But then they decided to double down on something and lumped another stegosaur called Alcovosaurus into Miragaia and named it as Miragaia longispinus. I wonder why. But also catalogue quite a few subtle differences between Miragaia and Dacentrurus, particularly to do with the vertebrae. There was a lot of subtle differences in the vertebrae from their descriptions, and they argued that, that Dacentrurus and Miragaia, different, totally different. But in 2025, another specimen from the same localities as the 2013 paper actually suggested that, Dacentrurus and Miragaia are the same specimen because another Dacentrurus armatus specimen came from the same place in Spain, and a lot of overlapping features with Miragaia because this specimen was more complete. And also this paper argued that Alcovosaurus is actually separate. And further went on to say, hey, individual variation is quite prominent in Kentrosaurus and also Stegosaurus stenos, which is the type species of the stegosaurs, and it's known from a lot of specimens. So the individual variation argument is pretty strong, considering that it also happens in two other stegosaurs. That's pretty strong. But then 2025, we get sort of a repeat of 2019 with more material of Miragaia longicolum being described from the same specimen and better prepared, I should say, and then argues that, hey, there's a lot of just vertebral, rib and limb elements that do not match up between Miragaia and Dacentrurus, and also Alcovosaurus is back in Miragaia. Poor Alcovosaurus. I mean, I haven't even had him into the title. Do you know why? Because he's only a bit player. As in, there's a bit of him there, a bit of him here, a bit of him everywhere, taxonomically. And then 2026 is just weird because this year, 2026, we actually have the description of Miragaia longicolum and Miragaia sp, so possibly a new species of Miragaia, or an existing one, we're not entirely sure. But these guys were found in the Morrison Formation in America. So that thing about North American Miragaia I was mentioning earlier, that's because of that. That was a great surprise. That was a proper big chuffing surprise. Miragaia in North America. So what is going on? So to sort of summarise this, basically we suspect that Dacentrurus and Miragaia are possibly the same animal because we have possibly overlapping and then more overlapping material, but then again there are subtle differences that are getting ignored by some authors or not looked at in some authors, or like I mentioned with the Miragaia specimen from Spain, that specimen was only partially prepped with the first paper earlier on, and then with the 2025 paper That's because there was more material prepped. So there was a lot of rushing to get to this argument from all authors. It's madness. So what are the conclusions of this? Well, my conclusions about this whole situation, because it is an interesting situation. Now you're all thinking, why is he talking about stegosaurs? He's a mosasaur fella. Well, that's because this is really weird, because there's a lot of excitement over specimens that possibly meet each other in the middle in terms of bridging, as in they slightly overlap and therefore must be the same taxa. There's also a lot of affirmation that individual variation among specimens is the key to actually synonymizing a lot of species. So Dacentrurus is highly variable, therefore Miragaia is just another Dacentrurus. But it's supported with variation in Stegosaurus and Kentrosaurus. However, variation is significant in species identification, but subtle features, if significant enough, are actually a distinguishing factor. And also there's distribution of specimens, because for some reason Dacentrurus is all over the place in Europe, and now Miragaia is all over the place in Europe and North America. So what is going on? No idea. But the answer to situations like this is that we need more material. Now you could argue, well actually you kind of highlighted that with more material being described in these papers. The problem is that these papers rushed this out because nobody wants to say, hey, Dacentrurus is Miragaia, Miragaia is Dacentrurus, or hey, they're separate taxa. Nobody knows, but I thought I'd just highlight this because it's an interesting topic, and wow, it's still unresolved, but I hope it does get resolved soon, and I'm really excited to see the results. But anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit different than what I do, but I really wanted to highlight this because I thought it was quite interesting that we have a Stego Wars. And that's the entire purpose of this video, so I can stay Stego Wars again. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you later. Take care of yourselves. Ta-da. Bye.